Nice to have your company. Welcome back to the show. New paid parental leave rules are set to come into effect from July the 1st this year. Now, these new rules mean employers will have to provide the government-funded parental leave pay to staff after that date. Now, for what companies need to do to prepare for those changes, I'm joined by Hall & Wilcox partner Alison Baker from Melbourne and Joydeep, who's been with me from the start of the show from People and Culture Strategies as well, coming into this one. But nice to have your company there in Melbourne. And let's just get underway, Alison, if we can, with you first off. Can you walk me through what is currently the status quo and what fundamentally alters on July the 1st?
Yeah, thank you, Carson. At the moment, the government scheme started on the 1st of January, so all eligible employees have been entitled to the government-funded paid parental leave, but on the 1st of July, the obligation will shift to employers to pay that money. So the government will fund employers, and then employers will pass that money on to their employees who are eligible to receive it.
So give me an example where, as I understand it, there could be not so much double dealing with an employee getting access to two amounts of leave, but if there is a minimum threshold that the government says everyone shall be entitled to, you can't then deny an employee that right simply because they're under an existing contract that limits the right to, say, even half that amount.
That's right, Carson. The government-funded paid parental leave will apply to all employees who meet the government's eligibility requirements. So as long as they meet those criteria, they will get the government-funded paid parental leave. Any schemes that an employee has available to them through their employer will simply be in addition to the government-funded leave.
All right, Joydeep, yeah, go.
Alison, good to connect with you again after some time.
Yes.
One of the issues that we were getting a lot of questions in relation to from clients was whether there was that opportunity to offset their existing paid parental leave schemes with those government-funded amounts, and I think there was some degree of confusion in relation to that. Was that something that you saw as well?
Yes, it was, Joydeep. We've spent a lot of time at Hall & Wilcox advising clients on this issue, and generally speaking, the government-funded leave is intended to be in addition to any employer-funded policies that were already in place. Only if an employer has a discretionary policy that really gives the employer the ability to chop and change what sort of payments they pay would there be any scope to offset. But I would caution employers to be very wary if they're going to change their paid parental leave schemes once their obligations start to administer the government scheme from the 1st of July, because they may in fact have an obligation to continue paying it. So by changing it, they may find themselves in breach of their obligations.
And do we know what the I suppose the repercussions are for all of that? What does the new legislation say they will therefore employers be liable for?
Yeah, if employers don't comply with their obligations under the Paid Parental Leave Act, then the Fair Work Ombudsman has the power to come and investigate, and if they feel that there has been a breach of the Act, then the Fair Work Ombudsman can prosecute the employer. So there's a number of options available. They could take a softer approach and issue compliance notices and tell employers that they haven't complied with the Act and what they need to do to comply. But for those employers who refuse to comply with compliance notices or are in serious breach of the Act, they may face prosecution.
Joydeep, bringing you in on that one as well, are you foreseeing certain unintended consequences of the role of the Ombudsman coming on site, to paraphrase what Alison was just saying, and, if anything, upping the ante, creating a very adversarial approach, and almost, as night follows day, we could be looking at a claim for constructive dismissal? That employer can no longer work in this environment because there's been so much dredged up in an unwarranted way.
Sure. I think one of the things that we've seen is that the Fair Work Ombudsman has been far more active than anyone was expecting, certainly far more active than its predecessor entity under the work choices legislation. In this particular context of what we're talking about, I think to your point, there are some risks there of inquiry and some questions being asked by Fair Work Ombudsman in relation to what might start off as being scrutiny of the paid parental leave scheme, but that can very quickly then merge into issues of broader compliance around parental leave, carers' responsibility, responsibilities, flexible working requests, whether they are properly being responded to, bearing in mind that the framework within which employers now have to operate is far more complicated than has ever been the case previously.
So you say it's akin to a bit of a fishing expedition. They can launch one once they're inside those doors.
Well, I think that if they're having a look at a number of issues that are triggered by a paid parental leave type complaint, there are some things that are probably going to come out that could make some employers feel a bit uncomfortable.
Speaking of feeling uncomfortable, Alison, back to you there in Melbourne. When it comes to that idea of how business has reacted to these changes, what sort of input have they been given? The criticism across so much new legislation that's going on and being drafted in Canberra is simply that they were excluded. Are they going to take up the cudgels and adopt what they're told to adopt on this? Because they had some say in it?
There was a bill by an opposition minister put forward to try and take away the obligation from employers so that this would continue to be a government-funded payment that was administered by the government, and that bill was defeated. Really, employers have this obligation. It's not going to change. In fact, arguably, we're at the start of paid parental leave, and I think it's only going to grow going forward. So employers really have a system in place through this Act, and they need to comply with it. And they've really got 2 months to get their systems ready, so that if an employee is eligible for the payment and the employer has to administer it, they're ready to go.
Yeah, just on that one as well, as we wrap this discussion, if an employee is eligible, as you just point out there, can they also conversely contract out of it? If they decide, actually, I don't want to be away from the coalface for 18 weeks, I'd rather cash it in, literally, put that money to work in the bank. I've got extended family that can carry out these functions just as well, thanks very much.
So you can only get the payment if you're actually the primary caregiver and you're on leave from work. Once you return to work, you're no longer eligible, but there is some scope in the Act for the payment to be transferred to another primary carer. So usually that will be the other partner, as long as they also meet the eligibility requirements and they're going to be the primary caregiver, then they can take the remainder of the leave. There's also some scope for grandparents and the like to also receive the payment if they're going to be the primary carer. But again, that's conditional on the fact that they also met the eligibility requirements, which includes a work test. So they must have been in employment prior to the birth or adoption of the child to be able to get the payment. So there is some scope to transfer the leave payment if needed.
Got it loud and clear. You get the last say, Joydeep, on this one. Is it going to prove successful, or you're looking at problems on the horizon?
I think there'll be a lot of administrative hassles for employers. One final word from me on this would be that it's important that employers understand there's a difference between the payment aspects of parental leave and the right to take parental leave, which is a separate issue altogether under the legislation.
Key distinction, well made, and of course more to be discussed as that one works its way into implementation July the 1st. Joydeep, People and Culture Strategies, thank you so much. And to you in Melbourne, Alison Baker from Hall & Wilcox, partner there. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you, Carlson.
And that